Having said that, let me start off today by very briefly summarizing some key features of Jewish religion and culture, and asking in particular what could or should be shown about it in a Jewish museum. If a Jewish museum is supposed to provide an objective coverage of the Jewish heritage and to include the full range of Jewish religion, history and culture, it's a pretty huge task. But let me just summarize that in 6 minutes. 6 minutes, 2 minutes each on Jewish history, Jewish demography and Jewish religion. You've got some keywords up there which will help you as I go through this. These are just some technical terms and some names that I'm using in this lecture in approximate order of occurrence, in rough order of occurrence. So let me start then with 2 minutes on Jewish history. Jewish history goes back 4,000 years to the time of Abraham, who lived in about 2000 BC. The early books of the Hebrew Bible cover the first 1,000 years after Abraham and describe the original spiritual insights of the Jewish religion. Then, in about 1000 BC, there is a Jewish people living as an independent nation under their own king in the territory now known as Israel. 1,000 years after that, in the year 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the Jewish state and sent the Jews off into exile from their country. Thereafter, they live as a diaspora people in lots of different countries and are governed by learned rabbi scholars who base their authority not so much on the Hebrew Bible, but rather on a large body of literature that they wrote, known as the Talmud. For several centuries, down to the 1920s, Poland was the center of the Jewish diaspora. The last 200 years have been marked by a lot of new developments, notably the granting to Jews of political equality, the rise of Reform Judaism and Jewish secularism, Jewish cultural assimilation to the surrounding societies, Jewish mass migrations, particularly to the USA, the Holocaust of the Jews left behind in Europe, and the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, followed by mass migrations of Jews there, especially by Holocaust survivors, as well as Jews who came from Muslim countries. And the Jews of Israel today represent round about 43% or so of the world Jewish population. So the first question here is, how much of all that Jewish history amounts to the Jewish heritage and so should appear in a Jewish museum? Which elements of that history should be put in the center of the museum, and which elements can be treated as secondary or indeed left out altogether? Secondly, 2 minutes on the demography. The Jews began as a Middle Eastern people. Abraham came from what is today Iraq. But during the last 2,000 years of diaspora, when the Jews were no longer living in the land of Israel, but spread out further and further across the globe, they steadily became a European people. In the middle of the 19th century, very nearly 90% of the Jews of the world lived in Europe, though because of the mass migrations to the USA at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, that percentage had dropped to just under 60% by 1939. Still, 60% is a lot, and it's an important figure to bear in mind when one's thinking about the Holocaust. The other thing to bear in mind about Jewish demography is that the Jews have many internal divisions. Most importantly, the Ashkenazi Jews, who originated in Germany and Poland, versus the Sephardi Jews originating in Spain and Portugal. There is also the rise of Hasidism in Eastern Europe in the 18th century, and the rise of a new division in the 19th century between Orthodox Jews and Reform Jews. Once again, the same question for the museum. Where should it put the emphasis? On the origins or on the history of the changes and divisions? Thirdly, the religion and culture. The Hebrew Bible and the Talmud have an insistence on good moral and ethical behavior, kindness and compassion, belief in a divine, monotheistic creator of the world, and a complex ritual system centering on such features as Sabbath observance once a week, kosher food, and ritual purity, especially, for example, that married couples should have no sex for about 2 weeks in every 4. The main sacred text for Judaism is the 5 books of Moses, known in Hebrew as the Torah, and the key definition of a synagogue is that it has a collection of handwritten Torah scrolls. Reading from them to the congregation is one of the main features of a synagogue service on Sabbaths and festivals. Reform Judaism began in the 19th century with the intention of modernizing the religion and culture, and since then much of Jewish life has continued to evolve, reaching the point today that present-day Jewish culture is marked by a lack of consensus about what constitutes the core of Jewishness. Is it religion, or is it peoplehood, or is it ethnicity, or is it nationality, as in Israel, or is it secular Jewish culture? The reality is that most Jews today have given up the old traditions, or at least have got inconsistent attitudes towards them. For many Jews, an obsessive interest in Israel and the Holocaust may constitute much of their attention as Jews. Nowadays, in democratic countries, being Jewish is largely a voluntary identity, whereas in the past, and particularly, of course, during the Holocaust, it was an identity imposed by the state. And once again, the same museum question. Where should it put the emphasis? On the rituals or the ethics? On the things which unite Jews or on the things which divide them? I will come back to these questions later on in this lecture. So that's my few minutes introduction to Jewish religion and culture.